My son asked for money 47 times in 14 months. Every time he had a reason. Every time I said yes. A friend looked me in the eye and said, "Dorothy, you are being used." I kept saying yes anyway. He never once considered that I was keeping records. For 38 years, I worked as a registered nurse at a hospital in Portland, Oregon. Night shifts, day shifts, whatever they needed. I came home most mornings with my shoes still smelling like antiseptic, and Gerald would have coffee waiting on the counter without me asking. That was 38 years of that small thing. My husband Gerald was a high school principal. Careful, deliberate man. He kept a running list in his shirt pocket of things he hadn't gotten to yet. We were not wealthy people. Same house for 31 years, most meals cooked at home. One modest trip every few summers, the kind where you drive to a lake and rent a cabin and feel grateful for the quiet. Every extra dollar went into what Gerald called our quiet insurance policy. He said it like it meant something larger than the account balance. I think it did. Do you have someone in your life who is that kind of steady, the kind you didn't fully appreciate until they were gone? When Gerald died of a stroke 2 years ago, the house got very quiet, very fast. His reading chair still held the shape of him for weeks. I kept finding his handwriting on things, sticky notes, on cabinet doors, grocery lists tucked into cookbooks. I didn't throw them out right away. I'm not sure when I finally did. He left the accounts intact, just over $430,000 in investments. The house paid off a small pension from the school district. I was not rich, but I was safe, and safe was what Gerald had spent his whole working life building for both of us. Michael is my son. He's 44. After Gerald died, he called every few days, drove up to Portland twice to help me sort through Gerald's study. I remember one evening, the two of us going through his father's bookshelves, Michael wrapping things carefully in newspaper like they mattered. I sat back and watched him do that and thought, whatever I did right as a mother, I must have done something right. I didn't examine that thought closely enough. Looking back now, have you ever confused someone's attention for love and only understood the difference much later? The first request came 4 months after the funeral. Michael called on a Tuesday evening. I remember because I just left my dinner plate in the sink, which I never used to do. He sounded careful, a little embarrassed. "Mom," he said, "I hate to even bring this up right now, but Vanessa's firm is going through a rough patch. A client backed out of a major contract. We're just short on liquidity this quarter. Could you help bridge a small gap?" Maybe $40,000. $40,000. He called it a small gap. I looked at my plate in the sink. I said yes. Gerald's voice, somewhere in the back of my head. "Money is just a tool. Use it for the people you love." I used that voice against myself for 14 months. If someone you loved asked you for $40,000 4 months after you buried your husband, what would you have done? Things never stabilized, not for long. 6 months later, it was Theo, a therapeutic program the insurance wouldn't cover, then a facilities fee at Chloe's school, then software licensing for the firm, then a real estate opportunity that would double within 18 months. He needed a silent partner. He promised every cent back with interest. Each time, the reason arrived, already packaged, already urgent, always wrapped around someone I loved, the grandchildren, the family, the future. I kept saying yes. Have you ever used someone else's words to talk yourself into something you already knew wasn't right? Retina. I should explain the notebook. I kept it in the kitchen drawer, a slim blue one I'd had since my nursing days. Nurses write things down out of habit, not suspicion. Date amount, what Michael said it was for. I wasn't tracking anything. I was just organized, the way I'd been organized for 38 years. One evening in November, I sat down at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The overhead light hummed. I opened the notebook and added up every line with a pencil column by column, the old way. $188,000. I put the pencil down, picked up my tea, set it back down without drinking it. The number sat there on the page in my own handwriting, like it had been waiting for me to catch up to it. I told myself there was an explanation. I ran through several. I sat at that table long enough that my tea went cold and the kitchen got dark around me, and I still hadn't moved. Have you ever added something up and wished with everything in you that you'd gotten a different answer? I didn't call Michael. The next morning I called my doctor and asked for a referral to a financial attorney. Elder Law. She gave me a name without asking why, and I have always been grateful for that. Ruth Takahashi had been practicing elder financial law in Portland for 22 years. Her office was on the 4th floor of a building downtown, small waiting room, 2 chairs, a plant that needed water. I brought the notebook, 14 months of bank statements, and every text and email where Michael had written, "I promise Mom, I will pay you back." Ruth read through everything without speaking. She had a way of turning pages that reminded me of the way attending physicians used to review a chart, thorough, not hurried. When she looked up, she said, "Mrs. Calloway, what you have here is a textbook pattern of financial exploitation by a family member. I want to help you." I told her I wasn't ready to act yet. I needed to be certain. She nodded. Said we'd move at whatever pace I was comfortable with. But I should stop all transfers immediately and tell no one what we'd discussed. I agreed, went home, and I waited and I watched. If you found out a family member had been doing this to you, would you have been ready to act right away, or would you have needed time, the way I did? 3 weeks later, Michael called with a different quality in his voice, lighter, more rehearsed. "Mom," he said, "Vanessa and I have been planning something special, a Caribbean cruise, 7 nights, the whole family together, something to celebrate getting through a hard couple of years. The kids are so excited." "You deserve this." Something moved in my chest when he said that, not warmth, more like recognition of a sound I'd been hearing for 14 months and finally had a name for, but I kept my voice easy. "That sounds wonderful, Michael." He said the cruise would run about $8,000 total for all 5 of us, a family rate he'd found. He and Vanessa would cover most of it. "Could I contribute $3,000 toward the cabin costs?" I said, "Of course." I transferred the money. Then very quietly, I hired a private document service to pull the public booking records under Michael's name. Do you think Michael knew somewhere underneath it all what he was really doing? I had to sit down when the document arrived. The actual booking, $24,000. Michael and Vanessa in a grand suite on the upper deck, $6,400 per person. Chloe and Theo in a balcony cabin next to them. Ocean view, sliding glass door, my cabin interior room, lowest passenger deck, no window, no balcony, a single narrow bed. $800. He had told me the whole trip cost $8,000. He had taken $3,000 of my money. The math was not difficult. Oh, I thought about not going. I want to be honest about that. I stood in my kitchen holding the document and thought about calling Michael and saying I wasn't feeling well. Easier, cleaner. But Ruth had said, document everything, and I had spent 38 years not walking away from things that needed to be seen through. I wrote her instructions on a piece of paper and folded it into my coat pocket. Knowing what you know now, would you have gotten on that ship? We flew to Miami on a Thursday morning. Michael was at the bottom of the escalator when we landed, standing in a linen shirt I hadn't seen before. He hugged me the way he always had, both arms solid, the kind of hug that used to mean something to me. I hugged him back. I noticed everything. Vanessa stood a few feet away in something cream-colored and pressed sunglasses pushed up on her head. She smiled at me. I smiled back. Chloe ran to me and held on harder than a 15-year-old usually allows herself to. The fact that she didn't care who was watching told me something about the house she'd been living in. Theo stayed back with his phone, 12 years old, somewhere else in his head. I didn't take it personally. We took a car to the port. The ship was enormous in a way the photographs hadn't prepared me for. I watched my son help unload the luggage from the trunk and thought, 44 years old, and I still don't know who you are. Have you ever stood right next to someone and felt the distance between you, like something you could almost put your hand on? My cabin was at the end of a corridor on the lowest passenger deck, the kind of corridor that smells like carpet cleaner and recycled air. The bed was narrow enough that turning over at night would require intention. The wall where a porthole might have been was solid. I sat on the edge of the mattress and looked at that wall for a moment. I wasn't angry yet. I was taking inventory. That first evening, after we'd agreed to meet for dinner, Michael knocked on my door. He came in, glanced around, briefly didn't say anything about the size of the room, didn't register what he was looking at, sat down in the small desk chair and leaned forward with his hands clasped the way he used to sit at the kitchen table as a boy when he'd done something and was working up to explaining it. He was wearing the watch, the good one, the one I had slipped inside a birthday card 2 Christmases ago with a note that said, "Your father would have been so proud of you." He told me Vanessa had important business contacts on the cruise, a captain's dinner the next evening in the upper dining room. He hoped I would understand if they kept it to just the 2 of them. I waited. "The thing is, Mom," he said, "Vanessa is worried that if you're there, the conversation might drift into family things. These are business conversations. You'd probably be bored anyway. There's a lovely restaurant on deck 4. You would enjoy it." I looked at my son for a long moment. "I understand, Michael. You do what you need to do." His shoulders dropped with relief. He patted my hand. "Thank you, Mom. I knew you'd get it." "You always get it?" He left. The door clicked shut. The ship hummed around me. Somewhere 4 decks above my head, my son and his wife were getting dressed for dinner in a suite with an ocean view I had partially paid for. He was wearing his father's watch. I opened my notebook and wrote down the time. When he said, "You always get it," what do you think he meant by that? I spent the rest of the cruise doing what nurses do. Noting things, dates, times, the shape of conversations. In St. Thomas, Chloe found me sitting alone near the port market and sat down beside me without saying anything for a while. Then she reached over and held my hand. She didn't know the full shape of what was happening, but she knew something was wrong, the way children always know, even when they can't name it. I let her hold my hand, and I didn't say anything either. By the time the ship docked back in Miami, Ruth had already filed the subpoena request for Michael and Vanessa's financial records. What do you think Chloe understood that afternoon in St. Thomas without anyone telling her? The documents came in over the following weeks, and each one made the picture a little worse. Michael had not invested the money. He had used it to hold together a life that had been collapsing quietly for 3 years. The interior design firm was barely functioning. 2 outstanding tax liens. The real estate investment had no legal registration anywhere. Their credit card records showed a country club membership, regular charges at restaurants. I'd never heard of $1,800 a month on a car lease. They were not struggling. They were spending, and they had spent my money doing it. Ruth laid the folder on the table and told me I had 2 options: pursue civil recovery, or, given the specific misrepresentations Michael had made about the cruise costs, refer the matter to the Financial Fraud Division of the District Attorney's Office. I had already been thinking about this. Lying awake in that room with no window, I had thought about Michael at 8 years old, with a broken arm crying into my chest in the emergency room, the way he used to say Gerald's name like he'd always been his father. I had thought about all of it for a long time. I told Ruth to pursue both. Do you think there's a point where protecting yourself has to come before protecting someone you love? And where is that line for you? The criminal referral was what Michael hadn't seen coming. He'd expected a hard conversation, maybe a lawsuit that would drag for years. He did not expect a detective from the Financial Crimes Unit to call his office on a Wednesday morning. His real estate license went under review that same day. His broker suspended him. Word reached Vanessa's firm through a phone call from a mutual contact. It always moves that way in business circles before any official verdict, and her primary remaining client walked. Michael called that evening. The rehearsed warmth in his voice was completely gone. Mom, what did you do? Not a question. I said I protected myself, Michael. The way you should have protected me. He said he could fix it. He'd pay back what I was claiming. We could settle quietly. And then after a pause, please, Mom, think about the kids. I thought about the kids every single day. I thought about what they were learning by watching their parents treat their grandmother like a number in a column. I thought about what kind of adults they'd become if none of this had any consequence at all. I told him all communication needed to go through Ruth. Said goodnight, hung up. He said, think about the kids. Do you think he meant it? Or was it just the last thing he had left? 3 months later, Michael accepted a plea on 2 counts of financial misrepresentation, no jail time, a structured repayment plan for $140,000, the recoverable portion, and his real estate license suspended for 2 years. His name appeared in a short item in a local business publication. Not a big story, just 1 paragraph. But permanent, the way search results are permanent. They sold the house, moved into an apartment near the airport with a parking lot view. The country club was gone, the car lease canceled. Vanessa took a job at a smaller firm at a lower level, starting over in ways she hadn't planned for. I don't say any of that with satisfaction. I want to be clear. What I felt when everything had finally settled was tired, not relieved. The specific tired that comes when you've seen your child clearly for the first time, not the version you spent decades imagining, but the actual one who was standing there all along. That kind of grief doesn't make noise. It just takes up a room in you and stays. Is there a kind of grief harder than losing someone who is still alive? Chloe texted me in October. She'd found my number in her own phone. Michael apparently hadn't thought to change that. Her message said, Grandma, I don't know everything that happened, but I know you didn't deserve it. I'm sorry. Can I call you sometime? I wrote back, yes, anytime you want. She called that Sunday, and we talked for 2 hours, sharp, honest, full of opinions about books and teachers and the specific difficulty of being the oldest in a household that was coming apart at the seams. I listened to all of it. I told her about Gerald, about what nursing had meant to me. I told her that hard seasons end, even when they don't feel like they will. She asked if I was angry at her father. I told her I was sad. That sad and angry lie close to each other, but they aren't the same. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said that was the most honest answer any adult had given her in a long time. I believed her. It said something about the house she'd been living in. If Chloe had called you instead, what would you have said to her? I started sleeping better in November. I joined a watercolor class on Tuesday mornings at the community center, something I'd wanted to do for 20 years and kept putting off because the money needed to go somewhere else, or Gerald needed something, or there was always a reason. My paintings were not good. My instructor, Felix, a man in his late 60s, who'd spent his career as an architect and took up painting after his wife died, The way some people take up gardening told me I had enthusiasm, and that enthusiasm was most of it. I kept showing up. In December, I booked a small group tour to Portugal for March, 2 weeks through Lisbon and the Alentejo region. Gerald and I had watched a documentary about it years ago, sitting on the couch with tea, and he had said someday had never come for him. Now it was mine to book. Michael sent a letter in January, typed not handwritten, which said something about the distance he was still keeping from himself. He was sorry. He hadn't understood what he was doing until it was done, which I thought was probably partly true. He hoped someday I would be willing to see him. He mentioned that Theo had been asking about me. I kept the letter in the drawer. I didn't throw it away, and I didn't respond. Some things need longer than a letter can hold. What would you have done with that letter? So, the morning I flew to Lisbon, I stood in the Portland airport with my carry-on and my passport, and I waited to feel something, nervous maybe, excited. What I felt was light. Not happy exactly, happy. Felt too small a word. More like setting something down after carrying it long enough that you'd stop noticing the weight. I found my gate, settled into my seat, economy class, middle of the plane, exactly what I'd booked. No one to explain myself to. The plane lifted and Portland went small beneath me. I pressed my hand flat against the cold window glass for just a second. Gerald, I thought. I finally said enough. Then I opened my book. Somewhere over the Pacific, the tightness in my shoulders, the kind that lives in you so long it starts to feel like posture, finally let go. I read for 6 hours straight. I cannot remember the last time I did that. Is there somewhere you've been meaning to go somewhere that's been waiting for you to finally say enough? If something in Dorothy's story stayed with you, I want to ask you one thing. At what point would you have stopped? After the first request? The 10th? Or would you have needed to see what Dorothy saw before you finally knew? Drop a comment. Tell me where you're from, or just tell me what you would have done. And if you know someone carrying a weight like this one, send this to them. Sometimes the right story reaches someone at exactly the right moment. I am Dorothy Calloway, and I finally boarded my own flight